Hello, my name is Yudilin, and welcome to episode 3 of the Rambled canvas. It's been about 4 weeks since the last episode, so it's been a little bit longer since I last recorded, but we're here now, and there's a lot of stuff I have to talk to you guys about. So, first off, I do like the structure of like reading a poem or two at the beginning of the episode, so I think I'm going to continue doing that. Today I have two poems for you. But before I get started on that, I hope all of you guys are doing well. I hope everything's been going great. We are just up finishing a couple days out from Valentine's Day, and I hope you guys all had a lovely Valentine's Day, whether you were by yourself, with friends, or with a special person. And so for today's poet, we're personally looking at one of my favorites, which is Emily Dickinson. So I will be reading two of them. One of them is a little bit shorter, and then the other one's a bit longer, but it's still a relatively short poem. And then after that, I will just sit here and I'll talk about a couple of things that's been going on. I've watched a lot of films. I've had some updates on creative projects and things that I've been working on. So I have a bunch of things to tell you. So, as always, I hope everything's going great. So, let's start off with our beginning poem. So, the poems that I'll be reading from Emily Dickinson today is Fame is a Fickle Food and Before I Got My Eye Put Out. Now, a little bit of context. As much as I really like Emily Dickinson, there's so many poems of hers that I have yet to read, but everything that I've read from her has been lovely. So, I'm going to start off by reading Fame is a Fickle Food, and then I will read Before I Got My Eye Put Out, maybe in like the middle of the episode, and then I think for the end of the episode, I'll read something that I actually wrote myself for a little bit of a change. Alright, so this is Fame is a Fickle Food. Fame is a fickle food upon a shifting plate, whose table once a guest but not, the second time is set, whose crumbs the crows inspect, and with ironic caw, flat past it to the farmer's corn, men eat of it and die. So, this particular poem, I really love it just because it mentions crows, and if you know me, I really love crows. They're my favorite bird, but I also like the title. Fame is a fickle food. I didn't really know what to make of it the very first time that I saw it, and even reading the poem now, both in my head and now out loud, it still like captivates me in this strange way. So, but yes, I do like this poem, and I'm curious to know your thoughts on it. So that's Fame is a Fickle Food, and we'll read Before I Got My Eye Put Out somewhere in the middle of this episode, or whenever I feel like the time is right. Alright, so, from the last time I saw you all, I watched 12 new films. So if I remember correctly, the last episode would have been January 18th or so, something like that. Midway through January 18th, a little over January, midway. And so from that time, I've actually watched 12 new films. The earliest would have been the day right after, and then the most recent would have been just last night. So, the films that I watched, and I'm probably going to pronounce some of these wrong, so I apologize for that. I watched The Watchers 2024. I saw The TV Glow, also 2024. Honey and Clover, which was 2006. I rewatched Possibly in Michigan, the short film, 1983. Neko Mimi, which was 1993. And then I watched All About Lily Choo Choo, 2001. And those were all the films I watched in January. And if we're going into February, the films that I watched were The Monsters, which was 2023, Uzumaki, 2000, The Secret, The Mystery. I've seen both, actually, of the Third Planet, which says 1981, I think, something like that. And then we've got 500 Days of Summer, and then Dovlatov, Dovlatov. That's the one that I couldn't pronounce. So, Dovlatov. So, make of that what you will. And that was 2018, I believe. And then the newest one, which came out 3 days ago, came out on Valentine's Day, which is Captain America: Brave New World. So, I'm gonna, to prevent this episode from being super duper long, I'm not gonna go into detail about all of these, because some of these are not too noteworthy. The Watchers was a pretty decent film. It's kind of like this, so I'm having the films and stuff like being right in front of my screen to make this easier, so I'm not like trying to remember this stuff off of memory. The Watcher was pretty decent. It was like this world where this girl and her, I guess not friends, but this community of people that are in the middle of the woods. I saw the TV Globe, was really, really good. I had actually been wanting to watch that one in particular pretty soon after it came out, but for whatever reason I did not. I really did love I Saw the TV Globe. That was 4.5 stars on Letterboxd, which I rarely give films unless I really love them 5 stars, so 4.5 is probably the highest you're gonna get unless I really love it. Honey and Clover was this artistic sort of Japanese film, like 2 stars. I didn't like it too much. The characters, I didn't really feel anything for them, and so usually that's something that really interferes with me enjoying a film if I can't get attached to the characters. Not necessarily like if I can resonate with them, but if I can kind of understand them and feel them, and that usually just depends on how good the actor or actress is. Possibly in Michigan, I just rewatched it. I love Possibly in Michigan. If you haven't seen it, you definitely should. It's, I think maybe like 10 minutes long. It's a very short film, and the lady who makes Possibly in Michigan also has a bunch of other films on her YouTube channel, and all of it's really, really good. Neko Mimi was extremely experimental by all definitions. It was definitely a film that I would say was just extraordinary. I did rate Neko Mimi 5 stars just because it was something that I had never truly seen before, and the closest thing that I saw to that would have been The Color of Pomegranates. Except Neko Mimi was a bit more in isolation, for lack of better words. All About Lily Choo Choo, I could make a whole video on that film. All About Lily Choo Choo was a beautiful film, but also extremely shocking. It has become one of my favorite films of all time, but there is quite a lot in that film. So, if you are interested in All About Lily Choo Choo, I highly recommend you go watch some other videos on it, because it is definitely a film that has a lot behind it, but it's a very beautiful film, and I highly recommend it to anyone that's looking into that sort of thing, which is more like a experimental, like really pretty type color grading and scenery and things like that, but it's a coming of age story, but a very raw type of coming of age story. Nothing is sugar coated, but I highly recommend you go look at that yourself and think if that might be something that you want to watch. The Monsters was also a pretty good film, but what I found interesting was that you could tell that The Monsters had a pretty low budget, but despite it having a low budget, it had a very beautiful story. And I think because it had such a beautiful story, you could completely forget about how low budget it was. And even in some sense, the way that the story is for The Monsters, which, despite it being called The Monsters, there's not actually any real monsters. Spoiler, sorry, there's not any real monsters in The Monsters. But because the story feels so realistic, the fact that it feels low budget and probably is low budget adds to the film's greatness, just because it feels like you're genuinely in these events yourself. Just because there wasn't so much effort in trying to make this all beautiful, picturesque type thing, like, it was just raw, and it was just like, it was literally like you were just looking through the lives of these characters, and I think it works really, really well for the type of story that it is. And then the next one I watched was Uzumaki, which was the 2000 live-action adaptation of Junji Ito's manga by the same name, which I like the color grading of it. It's got this, like, green tint throughout the majority of the film, but I wouldn't say that it did anything, like, wonders to it. I gave it 2.5 stars. It was an okay film. I liked it overall. It just wasn't, like, anything super duper outstanding. And then we have, The Secret of the Third Planet. Here on Letterboxd, it says 1981. But I'm pretty sure when I watched it, it said it was from the 70s. So the time that it was made is a little iffy, and I can't guarantee you that I'm telling you the right year, but that's not important. What's important is the film. So The Secret of the Third Planet, The Mystery of the Third Planet, I loved it. I loved it so much. I rated 4.5 stars, and the only reason I didn't rate it 5 stars was because I wish it were a little bit longer. I do know that it was a children's cartoon. I was looking back, and I even watched an analysis video on it after I had finished the film, to give a little bit more context, historical context, and stuff like that for the film. So I do know that was like a children's cartoon, right, based, geared towards children. But the only reason I didn't rate it 5 stars was because I wish it was a little bit longer, and I wish I had time to spend a little bit more time with the characters. I loved the story. The animation was beautiful. The story was captivating. I'm not a type of person to really, like, watch things with, like, supposedly high technology, sci-fi. I'm not, like, a huge sci-fi person in general. Dystopia, utopia, things like that. I don't usually delve into that. There's sometimes when I do, but I don't usually delve into that. But The Secret of the Third Planet, The Mystery of the Third Planet, was beautiful. So, like, all in all, I really, really loved that film. And I think after I had watched, like, the analysis on it, it just added so much more detail and depth to it. But I really, really loved this film so much. So, it was beautiful. Great. What I cannot say was the film that I watched right after that. And funny enough, I watched both of these films in the same day. I watched a film I absolutely loved, and then later that day I watched a film I absolutely despised, which I think is pretty funny. I finally watched the infamous 500 Days of Summer, which, for me, I had actually been wanting to watch 500 Days of Summer for, like, over a year, but I couldn't find what streaming service to watch it on. And when I finally figured out where I could watch it, I watched it, and boy, I was very disappointed. I was very disappointed in this film. If you like the film, I can see why people like it, but it really was not for me. It was very disappointing, and I think a big reason why I found it so disappointing was just because I had waited so long to watch the film. I think had I watched it, like, right as soon as I wanted to watch it, things might have been a bit different. But I think because I had put it on this, like, pedestal, because I've seen so many edits on it, like, on Instagram and stuff, like, oh yeah, this film is so good, and the Smiths, and blah, blah, blah. And, I love the Smiths, and the Smiths is, like, a big part of this film. If you don't know, the iconic scene from the film is, this boy and the girl, like, going into, like, an elevator, and the guy has these headphones on, and the girl's, like, right next to him, and the boy has, like, the Smiths, like, blasting out of his headphones to where he can hear it, and the girl's like, oh, the Smiths, I love the Smiths, right? And it's that iconic scene. I don't know if you've heard of it, but that's the main scene that made me want to watch it, because I had seen it over and over and over again. So I was like, okay, the Smiths, I love the Smiths, so much. This movie has to be good. It has the Smiths. No. Out of all the films I've seen on Letterboxd, I rated this the lowest possible I could. Because I'm pretty sure you can't rate a film 0 stars, and I think 0 stars is a little bit mean. I rate it half a star. You know, to say hate is a strong word. I wouldn't say I hate this film, but I really, really did not like it. So, but I think that the funny in it for me was watching such a beautiful animated film, and then right after watching, it wasn't a romance film. I don't even know what you would call it, rom-com. Like, it wasn't a romance film, like, at all. Disappointing. But I think it was funny how I watched an entirely beautiful animated film, and then right after watched something super disappointing. So, there's my rant on that. So if you like 500 Days of Summer, that's amazing. That's great for you. It's just really, really not for me, and I don't see myself rewatching it. I'm gonna be honest with you, I do not see myself rewatching it at all. The next one I watched was February 12th, I believe, so not too long ago. It took me a while to get through this film just because I was watching other films at the same time. Do Vlatov, which I feel so bad for butchering this guy's name. I know it's an author, but I feel terrible for not being able to. I should have researched ahead of time how to say his name, so I'm really sorry. But it was basically, it just follows this writer. It follows this writer. Let me pull up the movie description. Yeah, so it's a writer who's like in the 70s of Soviet Russia, and he's it's basically him and like his friends kind of just like talking about poetry and writing and things like that. The film was very long. I think it was a little over 2 hours, which, you know, I don't mind watching long films. I've watched films that are over 2 hours before, but if you're gonna have a film that's that long, please, like, make it captivating. The story didn't. It was pretty. It was a pretty film. Right, I like the settings that they chose. You know, the characters, the costume design was great. I loved what they did with the clothing. The story felt like it could go anywhere, but not in a, oh, I'm so excited, where's the story gonna go? But more in a, like, I don't know where this is gonna go, this is kind of confusing. And for the record, all these films, these are just, like, my personal opinions, obviously. I think I can appreciate the beauty and the amount of effort and work that it takes to make all of these films. And, you know, these films, some of these are very highly acclaimed. So if you like the films, that's amazing, right? So if I say something that I don't like about a film, I don't mean it in a very critical sense. I just mean it in, like, this is just my personal opinion. So, I mean, I can't say that every single film is the greatest film of all time, because then I would be lying to you. So, these are all just my personal opinions. So yeah, this film, Do Vlatov, I promise you, you know what? Yeah, I promise. I'm sorry for mispronouncing his name. Alright, and so since we're coming up to, you know, nearly 20 minutes here, we are gonna go to the last one. So I did say I wasn't gonna spend 5 million hours talking about the films that I watched recently, but I mean, that's kind of what ended up happening. So, all these films are great. So the last film I watched, which was last night in a movie theater, Captain America: Brave New World. Now, I'm gonna make this super fast because I could be here all day about this film. I'm not a big Marvel person, okay? I don't know the lore behind Marvel. I don't know that much. I don't know about Captain America. Like, I know who he is, but I can't tell you details about him, okay? This film, for what it was pretty decent. So I'm not gonna say it was super great, and I'm not gonna say it was bad, because I don't think it was bad. So it was okay. It was a decent film. So that's all I'm gonna say, because I know so little about the Marvel Universe, and I know so little about the lore and the plot and all of that, and how they kind of, like, stack on top of each other just a little bit, but they can stand on their own. Because I don't know anything about that, I'm not going to say very much about this, because I don't. So yeah, overall, all these films were pretty decent. All About Lily Choo Choo, The Secret Mystery of the Third Planet, and Neko Mimi are probably the only films that, like, I really, really loved, but the rest of them, I would say, are probably, they were just pretty decent. So yeah, that was that. So now that we finished talking about our films, I'm going to talk about the next thing, which is I want to talk about what books I've read. Now, unfortunately, I've only read one book. I know, it's been a month and I've only read one book. It's unfortunate. So the book that I read was a selection of poems by Charles Simic, which is Come Closer and Listen, New Poems. I checked it out from my library. Now, unfortunately, since I did check it back in, I do not have a poem that I could read for you off of that book. But if you do want to read it, it's this like yellow cover and it has this blue chair in the cover. Yeah, so it's just yellow and then it's this blue chair in the center of it and it's this painting. So it's really pretty. But I highly recommend reading it if you haven't already. I really liked Charles Simic just because his poetry read almost like, in the best way I can describe it, it reminded me of the type of poems that I wanted to write when I first started writing poetry. And for lack of better words, I would say it was kind of like the poetry I envisioned in my head that I wanted to write when I first started writing. So when I was looking through the poetry section of my library and I was looking through the books that I could read and I was flipping through the pages, right, because usually if I'm trying to read a poetry book, right, you know, sometimes if it's like a compilation one, it's kind of difficult because you're getting all sorts of different voices and mixes and influences and people write differently, all caps, no caps, line breaks, making pictures with the words, right? There's a bunch of variation when you're reading a compilation book. But when you're reading a poetry book that's only from one poet, you can just kind of get a taste or kind of like a feel for the type of poetry they write just based off of a couple poems if you just flip to a random page. So that's what I did for this poet. And so when I looked through some of the pages in the book that he had been reading, I was like, wow, this looks really good. So right away I checked it out and I read it in maybe about 2 days or so. Because I read it I think in 2 sittings because there were other things that I was doing. But Come Closer and Listen by Charles Simic. Again, I didn't know who Charles Simic was, but that particular book, Come Closer and Listen, beautiful title, by the way. I love the title that he chose for that book. I highly recommend reading it if you have the opportunity to. So that was that for my new books that I've read. If we're going on to my own poetry, so on the last episode I did talk about writing songs, and I know in the first episode I also talked about writing lyrics and songs. I decided that some of the songs that I had written, I'm not a singer, right? I don't sing good. I thought that maybe some of the songs that I had written might have been better off as poems. And then some songs I don't think would make very good poems just because, you know, with a song, if you do a lot of repetition, it's good, it's catchy, but if you do it in a poem, it might just seem like, oh, this person's repeating the same line over and over and over again. And repetition in poetry is good, but I think if you overdo it, it doesn't sound very well. So, but the poems that I've written recently, I did post Green Room, Your Little Green Room, I believe was the name of the poem. I write the titles of my poems really fast. Like, I just kind of come up with something on the spot, so sometimes I don't remember the exact words for the name of my poem. But I'm pretty sure the name of the poem was Your Little Green Room. I had posted that not too long ago on my Instagram, and then today, before recording this, I went and posted that on my YouTube as well. So, there's that, which is great. If we continue going on for what is the other poems that I have, so yeah, with the songs that I written, some of them I decided were probably good as, like, standalone songs that will, I don't know if they'll be sung. I know some people that I could probably get in touch with that sing pretty decently. I do know one for sure that sings absolutely incredible. But in terms of songs, I don't know where I'm going with that. But I did take some of my songs and I decided to turn them into poems. And sometimes that actually works, like, a lot better than, like, just keeping them as a song. So yeah, sometimes songs can be turned into poems, but sometimes songs can be turned into poems, but sometimes poems can't be turned into songs. Sometimes. So, but I think this is a good, probably, like, middle point here. So I think I'm going to talk about, I think I'm going to perform, speak. I think we're here in the middle, so I think I'm going to talk the next poem before I talk about my poem. Before I talk about the poems that I've written, I'm going to talk about, or say, the Emily Dickinson poem that I was talking about earlier at the beginning of the episode. So this is before I got my eye put out, which, the first title of Emily Dickinson's poem that I read, the first one, at the beginning of this episode, I thought that was a pretty cool title. But before I got my eye put out, it's an even more interesting title. And when I was choosing, by the way, I choose what poem I want to read for this by, like, just kind of thinking of either a poet or opening up a book and kind of just picking a random poem off of the book. But for this episode specifically, I really wanted to read Emily Dickinson just because, why not? She's great. And so I was looking at a collection, like a list of all her poems. Well, not all of them, but a good chunk of them. And I was like, okay, I'll just pick the one that has, like, the coolest title. Before I got my eye put out. So, this one's a little bit longer than the one at the beginning, but doesn't matter. So, before I got my eye put out. This is before I got my eye put out. Ready? Before I got my eye put out, I liked as well to see, as other creatures that have eyes and know no other way, but it were told to me today that I might have the sky. For mine, I tell you that my heart would split, for the size of me, the meadows, mine, the mountains, mine, all forests, stintless stars, as much of noon as I could take between my finite eyes, the motions of the dipping birds, the morning's amber road, for mine, to look at when I liked, the news would strike me dead, so safer guess, with just my soul, upon the window pane, where other creatures put their eyes, incautious of the sun. When I first read this one, I really thought it was really pretty. The meaning of this poem, let it be what you want it to be, but I do really like this one, and so I wanted to share it with you. So, that is your middle episode Emily Dickinson poem. I hope you enjoyed that one. In terms of my own poems, I've been writing so much. I wrote, I think I wrote about 7 or 8, I think, since the last one, which doesn't seem like too much, but I had kind of this, like, gap where I wasn't really writing that much poetry, and then, like, the past week I had been writing at least 1 poem a day, and which, by the way, if you put yourself to write a poem every day, even if it's a short one, because a lot of the poems that I write are typically pretty short, maybe only a couple stanzas long, But if you put yourself to write at least a poem a day, even if it's a short one, you'll get that habit really fast. So I've been doing pretty good on that. I've been writing at least one, sometimes two a day. It depends on how my inspiration is, and it depends on my time. Sometimes I write it throughout the day. Sometimes I just kind of sit down and I write it in one sitting. It just depends. So, I will be reading one poem at the end of the episode as a little treat. But in terms of like my album, my singing album, my lyric album, I've decided to change that. I don't think I'm gonna release any form of singing album. No, I don't think I'm gonna do that. With the Grammys that happened recently, and when you look at the nominations, there's spoken word poetry album nomination. And I don't know if you knew that or not, but I did not know that they had spoken word poetry album as a thing you could get nominated for the Grammys. And that made me kind of think, okay, like I knew that spoken word poetry albums were a thing, but I didn't know that they could get Grammy nominated. And so that was pretty cool. But it got me thinking, okay, if you can't sing, but you've got songs that you can turn into poems, why don't you make a spoken word poetry album with the songs that you've written, turn them into poems, and then take the poems you've already written and put them to music and release it as an album. And I just thought of that like randomly the other day, and I was like, that's a pretty good idea. I mean, why force yourself to sing when A, you're not really comfortable singing, or I guess I'm not, I'm speaking for myself. A, I'm not really comfortable singing. B, I know I don't sing well. And C, I've been doing this poetry thing, you know, a lot longer than I've been doing any form of songwriting. And, you know, people say that songs just poetry to music, and that's debatable. I think it just depends on the format of the poem and the format of the lyrics and the songs and all of that. So that's debatable. But it really got me thinking, if I have these poems that I want to share, and, you know, with the creation of Rambled Canvas, I've really become a lot more comfortable, I guess, with my own voice, because the first bits of sharing my voice, at least 2 words, like, and really talking for long periods of time, was with the spoken word poems, like there was a poem that I released a couple months back. It was my first time doing spoken word poetry. Faceless, still. We're working on that. We're working on the face part. I might have a video coming up where I actually do show my face. But we're still working on that part, but we're not voiceless anymore, so that's good. Becoming, like, with Rambled Canvas, I've, like, slowly become more comfortable with, like, posting my voice onto the internet, and you know, even with these, like, poems that I speak at the beginning of the episode and such, becoming comfortable with spoken word poetry, because, again, I've done spoken word poetry, in person before. I've said poems to friends and things like that, but, not for the whole internet, so, but, this is kind of like that step, and with a spoken word poetry album, I think that would be pretty cool to just kind of throw myself out there and create a collection of poems, ones that haven't been heard before, by the way. That's another reason why my poetry account's pretty slow on Instagram, because a lot of the poems that I write are like, oh, this is automatically going into the album, and I don't want to post it on Instagram, because the whole point of the album is that it's supposed to be a collection of new poems, and not, like, poems that you've already read on my Instagram page. So, there's that. But anyways, in terms of that spoken word poetry album that I'm mentioning, I have an idea for the title, and believe it or not, the title of the album is going to be the same title of my other album, which, if you've been following my account for a while, especially on Instagram, in the summer of last year, I posted a track list. When it had songs, it had titles like Watch Me Send, like, what, 200 pounds of dirt to your front doorstep or something like that. And then there was another one that was called, like, I Let Bob See the World Because He's Depressed. Like, titles like that, I don't know if you remember. I think some people should remember. If you've been following me for long enough, you should have seen that. But I don't think I ever posted the title for that album. I don't think I ever posted the title for that album that was in the works. But the title of that album, I'm using that as the title for this spoken word poetry album. So if you're wondering what's going to happen to those songs about watch me dump whatever amount of pounds of dirt to your front doorstep, they were the silliest titles ever. Let me see if I can remember them. Yeah, I remember one of them was definitely about Bob. I think one of them was also supposed to put, like, one of them was, like, pretty simple. One was, like, Hotel Art, which is still being made, by the way. Hotel Art is being made, not as a song, but as a poem. And then there's one called Farmer Boy, I'm pretty sure, as well, that was on the track list. I'm trying to remember, but there was I think it was maybe about 13 or 14 songs, and it was, just, like, randomly posted, like, in the summer. I think it was, like, June or something of last year. I'm not sure if you remember, but I think those that have been following me for a while, I think they should remember. I think so. Something like that. But anyways, regardless, the point of that was that the title of that album is going to be the same title. And even the album cover concept for that is also going to be the same concept for this one. So there's a connection. So if you've been around long enough, there's a connection. If you've been around long enough, and you remember, there's a connection. So, but spoken word poetry album. That's what I'm working on. I have about 10 tracks right now, with more coming, by the way. So, and because some of my poems are really short, I'm probably gonna have quite a bit of tracks on the album, just because I imagine that some of them are only going to be maybe like a minute 30, just because they're short poems. So, take with that what you will. This is a pretty long episode. This is my longest episode to date, but I mean, it is a podcast. It is a podcast, and it is a rambling one, a rambled canvas. That's why it got its name. So, a couple more things, and then I'll let you go. But in terms of art, I've created a new collage piece that will be up on my Instagram, hopefully later today, if not right after this, if not tomorrow. But I have a collage piece that I have to post on my Instagram that you'll be seeing soon. And then I have a kind of like abstract shape type painting with tempera paint, which I never use tempera paint. With tempera paint and color pencil that should be coming maybe later this week. It's about done. And then in terms of my photography account, I have a lot of photos that I've taken. I need to edit them and I need to post them, but expect that in the coming week or two. And then finally, in terms of music, stuff I've been listening to recently, Bob Dylan, obviously, listen to a lot of Bob Dylan all the time. Sonic Youth, been listening to a bit more of their stuff. The Velvet Underground. Also Joy Division and Elliott Smith. That's probably what I've been listening to the most. That and just random songs that I find on YouTube with 50 views. That if I tried listening them, I would probably be here for a while. But I've found a lot of random, YouTube has been recommending me a lot of random albums and songs that have like less than 100 views, which they're absolute gems. They're incredible. I wish they were on Spotify, because I would be streaming them. But no, they're only on YouTube. And the last thing that I have, because this is the longest episode, so I'm gonna talk about one more thing. I'm gonna read you one of my poems, and we'll call it a day, okay? Okay. And then I'll see you in the next one. The last thing I have is, I actually forgot to mention that I did read one other book, and that was Poetry Slam, The Competitive Art of Performance Poetry. It was a book that was released in the 2000 or so, and it was, the author is actually never listed. It just says that it's edited by this guy named Gary Mex Glasner, I'm terrible with names, but it was originally published in like 2000. It's just a compilation of a bunch of different poets, slam poets specifically, and a lot of them are ones that have won like award for their slam poetry. And again, this video podcast episode is going to be forever if I start talking about slam poetry, so we will save that for next time. I promise. I'll put a pin on it, and I promise next time that's where we're going to start with the next episode. We're going to talk about slam poetry. But so yeah, the last thing I have for you besides my poem that I'm going to be reading for you is, I have this, like, I got a new kalimba recently, and I normally have this like 17 key acrylic glass kalimba that looks like a bear. I've posted one kalimba cover of Happy Birthday. Yeah, I played Happy Birthday on the kalimba. It's, if you scroll down to my YouTube, there's one. It's pretty old. I think it's from like 2023 or 2022. It's pretty old now. But I got a new kalimba, and if I can, I would like to post like a cover video using this kalimba. And it's like a wooden kalimba, and it's turtle shaped, and it only has 7 keys, but it's so pretty. So I'm just gonna play like each individual like piece, not piece, but each individual little bit. It's not in tune, but I still think it sounds pretty. So it's not tuned to anything in particular. I bought it like this, so I'm gonna let you hear it. I think it's pretty cool. So, I might tune it, and I might fix it a bit, or I might leave it like that. I don't know. We'll decide later, but it's a cool little wooden, turtle-shaped kalimba that I bought. So yeah. So the last thing, I have for you is, I want to read a poem, the one that was actually a song, but then it got turned into a poem. And this one is gonna be on the album. But sure, you'll know the poem, but you won't know the music behind it, and I'm probably not gonna perform it the same way now as I am gonna perform it on the album. So, I'm gonna perform, let me see, because I have my notebook right here, with all the poems that I'm gonna be using on the album. And I think the one that I'm gonna read for you all today, I'm gonna read you The Crow Farm. I think that's fitting. We read Emily Dickinson's poem at the beginning of the episode, and there was a crow mentioned. And now we're reading The Crow Farm, which definitely is gonna have crows mentioned. You know, me and crows, I love crows. Okay, so this one's not too long of a poem, but again, this is my poem. So, I wrote this one a couple days ago, and so yeah, I might release an individual video with this one, but we'll see, and then I'll let you go after this. The Crow Farm. If one were to raise their ears to the sounds of crows, allow themselves the generosity and vulnerability to chew on the bitterness of something further than plain, to feel its sharp, velvet feel of a mental cage, down by a farm, as the rain goes through, submerged to every nook, cranny, and uncanny brain-eating amoeba floating from the town, the water would drown. Brown and murky, ghost town similar, whispers now harmonizing with the creatures of the ground that always roamed. Broken twigs wrapped by leaf slay, mixed with red acrylic paint, the hue of pomegranates intertwined with the bleeding color of crimson tulips, sat around a corner 45 miles south of an oil rig. Teenagers once used it as a dumping ground for pure angst and creative betrayal. What was once a farm within a town, full of an urge to scream freedom from all of life's restraints, now lies a space where only crows reside. So that was the crow farm. Oh my goodness. Talking too much is making me trip over my words near the end of this. That was the crow farm. So yeah, I did write that poem a couple days ago. I like it. It probably will be on the album to music, of course. Something, maybe like a little like guitar in the background or something like that. Maybe a little bit of like thumping drums or something. Maybe. We'll figure it out. But yeah, so this is the longest episode to date. But then again, it has been almost a month, basically, since the last episode. So I think it fits. Because this would technically be, if it was every 2 weeks that I released an episode, this would technically be 2 episodes in one. But we have this. So I'm going to let you guys go now. It was great talking with you. Or I guess it was great having you listen to me. Again, thank you very much. I appreciate you all for sitting through this and listening and taking time out of your day to have this kind of playing in the background as you do whatever it is you do. But I will see you in the next one. I hope you enjoyed Emily Dickinson. I highly recommend reading her poetry. I hope you enjoyed my little rant about all these different films that I've seen recently. I hope you liked The Crow Farm. I had a lot of fun writing it. And I hope you have a lovely rest of your day. I'll see you in the next one. As always, thank you very much. And this is Yudi Lin, whichever one. This is Yudi Lin at the Rambled Canvas. And thank you so much for listening. Bye-bye.